Hello, and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Sam Grover, Senior Litigation Counsel at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This week, we're just a bunch of guys talking about sports. All right. Joking aside, we're talking about the pressure that some student athletes face from their coaches to participate in team prayer or other religious acts, and why it may be more problematic than you might realize. I'm joined by Matt Kenyon, our Director of First Impressions, and Mickey Dollens, our Regional Governmental Affairs Manager, both of whom have faced this kind of pressure when they were student athletes. So thanks for coming on the show to share your experience, Matt and Mickey.
Glad to be here.
And Mickey, we might as well test your microphone now. How are you feeling? You good?
Hey everyone, I'm doing great.
Love
it's
it.
A beautiful day in Oklahoma.
Awesome. Glad to have you. So we'll also take a look at some key examples of religious pressure on student athletes from across the country and the legality surrounding religious coercion by coaches. As always, if you have any questions during today's discussion, please leave them in the chat below or email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions live during the show. So Mickey, let's start with you. What sport did you play and where? What kind of peer pressure are we talking about here? And what was your experience as a student athlete?
Yeah, I played college football at SMU in Dallas and Southern Methodist University. You may assume, the expectation is it's a religious school, but actually, while it was founded under the Methodist Church in today's modern day, it actually operates as a secular, pluralistic institution. And so while I was in class, I was never proselytized to by professors, never required to go to chapel. But on the football team, it was a little bit different story with a lot of complex dynamics and ritualistic habits that athletes partake in sports. And so I played college football at SMU, and then I was on the United States bobsled team a few years after that.
Can you give, the Olympic bobsled team sounds really cool. I imagine you had a coach for that as well. Did the pressure mostly come during the football then?
That was really interesting. And now as a 37-year-old, I kind of understand that these football coaches whose livelihoods and family stability is dependent on a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds, it may feel a little bit more reassuring to feel like you have some divine guidance helping you out on the football field. But yeah, it was pretty common back then for us to partake in a pregame chapel, and it wasn't particularly student-led. You have this whole dynamic on a team of you want to be bought in, you want to be a team player. You don't want to be excluded, that's for sure, especially when there are scholarships on the line and playing time on the line. And when all your coaches are attending these chapel meetings, you feel obligated, pressured to an extent to be there, to show up, to show that you are part of the team, that you are bought in. And I admit, I went for those reasons. And I even had a teammate on the team who was Muslim, and he was a walk-on. And if you know anything about walk-on players, that means they're not on scholarship, but they're trying to earn a scholarship. So they're doing everything a scholarship player is doing, waking up at 5 a.m., doing the workouts, going to the study halls, but they're not getting compensated. They're not getting a scholarship. And so they're doing everything they can to be in the coach's good graces. And so even though my buddy was a Muslim, he was attending these Christian-led chapels before games just to get on the coach's good side. And it did work out. He ended up getting a scholarship. But I always felt like even back then as a 20-year-old that he was being pressured, like he was being, in a sense, coerced into participating in pregame chapel to earn favor with the coaches. And that just didn't even sit right with me at the time. And then also before a pregame meal, coach would randomly pick a player to stand up and give a pregame prayer over our meal. And if you didn't do that, it would kind of dissolve the ritual and the superstition that goes into pregame rituals. And so you definitely didn't want to compromise the team's success by throwing, the habits out of whack. And so, of course, if your name was called, you'd stand up and you'd give a prayer beforehand. And of course, as an athlete, that you're participating in a highly competitive and even dangerous sport like football or bobsled, it feels good to feel like you may have a divine protection, especially when you're going down a bobsled track at 100 miles per hour. And, you've seen people die doing this sport. And so even if it is just a coping mechanism to give you some reassurance or some confidence to be able to go down a hurling bobsled at 100 miles per hour, there is that aspect to it. But in any case, superstition, religion, and rituals all play a huge factor in sports, and it all comes down to getting a competitive edge and for getting your mind right before that whistle blows or before that start clock begins.
Right. So just to say the part that you left unsaid, the reason why the coaches have so much influence here is because they determine player playing time, right? Which then factors into whether a student will get that scholarship, the walk-on student you described, and then they dictate everything, right, in terms of how the student relates to their teammates.
Yeah, especially at the Division I level or any collegiate sport for that matter, the level of competition is so high that you're always looking to be replaced. I remember my sophomore year, the head coach that recruited me was fired, and we brought in a brand new coach. And that coach, of course, wants to free up scholarships so they can bring in their own players. They created this 3-strike system, but you would never know you got 3 strikes until you actually got that third one. And then it was completely up to the coach whether or not they wanted to suspend you for a week or eliminate or kick you off the team. And so if you were 1 minute late on your 8 hours of study hall, that was a strike. If you missed, if you were late to a morning workout, that was a strike. So eventually everyone on the team ended up getting a strike. And I even did, but thankfully I was one of the players who only was suspended for a week and I wasn't kicked off. But I did everything in my power, including going to chapel and complying and all of this in order to stay in a coach's good graces, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of scholarships that could be on the line. And, it's really sad to when you feel that now this isn't about performance. This is about my proselytization. It's about prayer. You want to go and compete as an athlete and not have to do the politicking behind it. And I felt like that was a lot of what was going on. And then especially with my friend who's Muslim, and then having to pretending that he was Christian in order to not be excluded by teammates and also to win the favor of the coach. Even at a young age, before I had thought much about this stuff, it just didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now, so Mickey, you've put this in terms of scholarship money and then also, playing time. But let's turn to you, Matt, for a minute here. What was your experience like as a student athlete, and what were your motivations when it came to the sports you were doing?
Sure. So unlike Mickey, mine was at a lower level in high school and middle school in rural Pennsylvania, where it was much more subtle. It wasn't, hey, let's all go to chapel together. It was more of a cross-country coach who is talking about his own religious belief during practice, which, you kind of like, okay, well, they're allowed to have their personal belief, but why are we discussing this during cross-country practice, right? It was you have the banquet at the end of the season, and at the banquet, somebody has to lead a prayer because, well, that's just what we do. And so it was much more of a subtle, almost peer pressure type of experience that kind of pushed you to feel like you had to be part of this group and do the thing that everybody else did, even if you didn't necessarily believe in what they were doing.
Sure. Yeah. And right. So like you said, you're a high school athlete, so there's not money on the line for you.
Right.
But kids want to play, right? Mm-hmm. So in the end, kids still understand that the coach ultimately dictates playing time and their status on the team, and you respond to that.
Yeah, well, and even beyond that, kids in high school, they're searching for identity. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're looking for role models. They're looking for people to, model their life after. And when those coaches who are people that they are interacting with very frequently, and in very intimate ways. And like you said, there's that power dynamic. It's really, it's almost an undue pressure that is so subtle, it's insidious.
Yeah, and again, public schools at any level, the high school level on up, even lower, elementary school level, they are putting these coaches in these positions of power, this position of authority over student athletes. And so ultimately, it's these government institutions who are responsible for making sure that coaches aren't pushing their personal religious beliefs onto players.
I thought Matt brought up a really good point, especially in high school. One of the most important things amongst peers is to fit in. And you want to be a part of a team, and that's one big reason why people join sports. But also for the people who have the insidious motivations of proselytizing, like we take released time that is in school, like LifeWise Academy. They know that by giving kids like little candies or like encouraging them to go back to school and talk about getting approved for release time, they can grow that. And for the most part, you have your bad actors like that. But I think for many coaches, it really comes down to just like the culture and environment that they grew up in. They don't technically mean anything bad by it, but they also look at it as a way to build up team chemistry. But, there's different ways to do that. A good coach can build team chemistry based off of teaching discipline, having great leadership, teaching life skills that doesn't infringe on anyone's religious freedoms. And I love that FFRF's mission is to educate the public on non-theism and why we can have a great moral society without having to necessarily believe in a deity outside of this world. And so it's just a matter of education as well. I know that I think there's a lot of really good meaning coaches out there. And specifically, not to knock anyone's personal belief. I don't mind when players acknowledge God for a win. That's their right. That's their religious freedom. It's when you have coaches that integrate religion as part of the team culture that they start to feel like, oh, I could be excluded. I'm going to be ostracized. Then that's when it really becomes a problem, especially in publicly funded universities and colleges.
That's right. So just like you can have a moral functioning society without religion being a central tenet of the actual, functional workings of that society, you can have a functional sports team without making religion the center of how that team interacts. But
that's
Matt and
exactly
Mickey,
right, Sam. And I just want to emphasize that point because after I finished playing college football, I did try out for the United States bobsledding team. And over the 3 years of living at the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, New York, I can't recall a single time where athletes were encouraged to participate in any type of Bible study or anything like that. It's also interesting that that level of competition was also competing against countries from all around the world. So it was really interesting. You take an American sport like football, and you're only playing against Americans, which religion is a pretty integral part of American culture for many people. But then you go and you compete against other countries. It just wasn't emphasized as much. I've never seen any other teams do that from around the world. And I do believe that athletes exercise their faith in their personal ways. But it was never pressured, or we never had like groups or things like that where they were trying to recruit athletes to come be a part of a Bible study, for example. So it's a really interesting nuance. And I mean, both sports are dangerous, but I think it also comes down to culture and where you're at. We see a lot of, especially in sports like football, religion is really, and basketball is really emphasized. And that could be for a lot of different variables. But also I think sports are just so chaotic. It feels good to have a sense of control over the variables that could take out your knee, could end your life in some cases. And so having that mental reassurance, I think, is a competitive advantage that many athletes feel like they get from exercising their faith.
Yeah, and you're certainly right that it's many athletes and many coaches around the country. We do see it at FFRF, we see it through complaints that parents and students send to us. But it's happening all around the country. It's actually a quite common experience. And I guess now we should take a look at some examples, recent examples of public schools or university coaches that have pressured their students to partake in religious acts. You can read more about these stories on our website. So Boise State University head football coach Spencer Danielson promoted Christianity within the public university football program. Let's start by watching this statement Danielson gave during a press conference.
We'll be back. We're going to keep working our tail off. We want to be a light on a hill that's going to do football different at Boise State. Doesn't mean it fits everybody. Doesn't mean it's perfect. We're going to do it different. It's going to be based on love. Be based on giving Jesus the glory. If people don't like that, don't come here.
Giving Jesus the glory. All right, next we have University of Colorado head football coach Deion Sanders. I've heard of him. Similarly incorporated Christianity into the university's football program, including leading prayers, inviting a pastor to act as the team's chaplain, and endorsing Christian beliefs to players. Here's a video of Sanders that he posted just yesterday on Instagram.
Thank you, Lord. Let's thank God because he is who he says he is in this world of lies and misrepresentation. God is consistent, God is present, and God is everything and all things. He is not a genie in a bottle or waiting to grant your wishes in your command. God is relational and God is love. Let's go get it today.
Yeah, that's Sanders sounding much more like a Sunday pastor doing a sermon from the pulpit than a football coach. And then, much more relevant to my interest personally, University of South Carolina women's basketball head coach Dawn Staley. She promoted Christianity within the university's athletic program as well. She prepared game day devotionals for players and referred to games as Jesus versus the opposing team. Matt and Mickey, so how do these coaches and what they've been doing with their teams, how does that relate to what you were experiencing?
I'd like to point out something the Boise State coach said. He said, if you don't like it, don't come here. And unfortunately, I've heard that phrase said more and more. There was a lawmaker just yesterday who responded to a constituent who respectfully asked if they not vote on a particular bill. And, he responded in the email with, if you don't like Oklahoma, then why do you live here? That's extremely exclusionary. You should never say, oh, if you don't agree with this religion, then you can just get out. I mean, that's exactly why we left the English monarchy in the first place over 200 years ago. We have to be tolerant of all religions and the lack thereof. And especially for a football coach working at a public university to say that, I know the university officials recognize that violates the Establishment Clause, but unfortunately they feel so emboldened to be able to be exclusionary. And then, Coach Deion, he's done a lot of good things for those kids. But if you looked in, he's using public, I don't know if he bought that microphone with university funds or whatnot, but you can tell he's probably in his university's office. He's in a coach's office, basically giving a sermon from equipment in his office. And, again, there's roughly 100 people on a football team, including the walk-ons. Statistically, not every single one of those players is a Christian. And so he's creating an environment where you're either one of us or you're not. I think he refers to the people who aren't Christian as haters, and if like that is the antithesis of building up team chemistry and camaraderie. And I would love for them to be able to see the hypocrisy and what that does to their team environment. And, to say that, hey, if you're not a Christian, then you can just go somewhere else, and you're referring to a publicly funded university, is very un-American and unpatriotic.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the Christian privilege that these coaches enjoy by being part of the religious majority in the country, right? It's the most prevalent, Christianity is the most prevalent religion in the country. It's certainly not the only religion, and you certainly can't imagine a Muslim coach or a Jewish coach speaking more specifically about their religious beliefs in a way that would ostracize Christians. Obviously, that would be a competitive disadvantage. So what's all this for then? Why do coaches use their religion as the central focus for how they try to get their teams to be cohesive together? Why focus on God over other aspects of the game?
I think Mickey made a point earlier that a lot of these people aren't doing this for negative reasons. They think they're doing something positive for their team. They're creating a common theme for the team. They're like the women's basketball coach, right? We're Team Jesus, and we have Jesus' power on our side. So it helps bolster that confidence because you feel like, well, Jesus is on our side. Gives you, like Mickey said, a little bit of sense of control over what happens. Maybe I won't get injured because God's on our side. But I think a lot of them, at least my experience in the high school level, was more of a they feel that they are passing along a positive message. They're doing something positive for the individual athletes on their team. And they truly, I think, most of them, maybe not Dion, but most of them, I think, truly believe that they are doing a positive thing for their student athletes.
Yeah. Mickey, I have sort of a related question for you as our regional legislative liaison. Coaches are infusing religion into their programs in a way that makes it Jesus versus the other. Do you see the same thing happening legislatively in the country?
I do. Yeah, it's us versus them. You heard the basketball coach from South Carolina say Jesus versus. And if you go to some of these like evangelical churches, it's very the sermons are very based in spiritual warfare. Put on your battle, put on your battle armor, take up your sword. A lot of these are relevant to going into a high stakes competitive environment such as sports. And I feel like they bring a lot of that from the spirituality side to the superstitious side to the faith and the religion. It all plays together. And to go back to the earlier question, like why is that? I believe at the root of it, it's all based in insecurity. There's something about having some control over the unknown. The sports can be extremely unpredictable. There's multiple instances when you're hurling down a bobsled chute at 95 miles per hour. If you don't exit the turn within a split second, you're going to end up on your head. If you get one more push at that start line, you could end up winning the race by the length of an eyelash. A lot of this stuff will be attributed to divine outcomes, to having divine favor. And then unfortunately, because there's many preachers who teach about hellfire and brimstone, there's coaches who feel like if there's any quote unquote sin on their team, they may be divinely unfavored to win the outcome of the game. And for many listeners who are listening, they may be like, okay, what's the big deal? It's just a game. Well, these coaches, they have to uproot their families. They have to move across the country. They're dependent on who they know to put food on their table and to help their families. We hear like Coach Deion Sanders just got a renewed contract for $58 million for 5 years. That's pretty rare. You've got a lot of collegiate coaches, high school coaches, who aren't making much money. Their job security is year to year, and their kids are enjoying their school to go to. And if they don't win, they're going to be selling real estate or something else like that. So they're going to do everything they can to ensure that they control those variables of the team. And for many of them, that like just predisposition goes back to a very young age, and it's faith. It's Christianity. I was having this conversation with one of my friends who works out at a gym I go to. She played college basketball, and her coach ostracized her and her partner for being gay. And the coach made it and this is a public university, made it very well known that the coach she said that did not approve of their lifestyle and ended up kicking her girlfriend off the team, but kept her because she was a valuable contributor to the team. But the coach didn't want that sin, is what they basically said in a roundabout way. And then where does that come from? That comes from deeply seated religious beliefs that they're trying to gain divine favor to have a desirable outcome in a game, so then they can continue to keep their job, to keep their family in a community that they may have become comfortable with. There's so many variables that go around it, and so Yeah, unfortunately. And then when we hear, a big championship that's come into the favor of the people getting interviewed who won the game, they first thing they say is they thank God. And then, typically it's a losing team who say that, everything happens for a reason. A lot of that is psychology 101. It's, grateful, it's finding silver linings. But unfortunately, if taken too far, and then, if it becomes less about personal faith and about mandating that others adhere to the same beliefs they have, that's when it can become pressure and coercive and very insidious, as Matt said.
Yeah. So, Matt, I'll ask you this. Is it different if it's the athletes leading the prayers at team functions? Why is it more problematic when a coach does it?
Well, I think a big difference is the power dynamic. Players are all on an equal playing field, to use a bad pun accidentally, but there isn't quite that same level of I'm the coach and this is how, I got to be the good coach who's really good at this sport because I, had Jesus on my side. It's a different dynamic. I think it's still my experience was much more of a peer pressure experience. And I think that even though the students may be leading the prayer, there is still that feeling of peer pressure that you have to be part of the group. And it's not quite as bad as, like Mickey was talking about that coach, really is making the decision of whether you get scholarship money and that kind of thing. But it still has a negative aspect to it because there's that pressure to belong, to be part of the group.
Sure. Yeah. And it can still ultimately be the coach who's setting the attitude for the team, right? The team culture, right? So maybe you have the captain leading the prayer. Is it at the behest of the coach? Is the coach watching to, see who is bowing their head in prayer when the captain does that? It's all still, there's still a coercive aspect to it when it's dictated that the whole team buy into this culture, right? And it is ultimately up to the coach to say, you know what, our team culture isn't going to be defined by one set of religious beliefs. We're going to have a culture that's about community, it's about acceptance and moving forward as a team, right? Rather than relying on one person's personal religious beliefs. And we can see, legally speaking, how this played out. Back in 2022, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in favor of Joseph Kennedy. So he's a high school football coach in Washington State who engaged in post-game prayers on the field, creating that team dynamic that's Christian-focused. So the Supreme Court said that Kennedy's prayers were protected under the First Amendment as free speech. But the Freedom from Religion Foundation emphasized in our brief to the court that public school officials must still respect students' rights by refraining from promoting or endorsing religious activities. So we highlighted that while the court's decision permits personal religious expression, it does not allow coaches or other school officials to coerce students into participating in religious activities, thereby maintaining the constitutional separation between church and state. That was a lot of the legal background there. Basically, what I want to emphasize there is that the Supreme Court ruled on this one specific case, basically saying that what the coach was doing there wasn't in his official capacity as the coach. Nikki, do you buy into that? Do you think players are unaware of what Coach Kennedy's doing at the 50-yard line after the game?
Well, also an important distinction in that case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but I believe the Supreme Court said that the coach had the right to go to the middle of the field to take a knee and silently pray to himself. That was his religious freedom. That was his right. What it didn't say was he could go to the middle of the field, hold up a Bible, and start giving a post-game sermon, correct?
That's right.
A huge difference there. And if he is like by, exercising his religious freedom, going to the center of a publicly funded football field and taking a knee and bowing and praying, and other students see that and they want to model that behavior, that's perfectly fine. They are doing that on their own accord. They're not being summoned. Now, some could say there's a little bit of coercion in there, but really, he's not saying, now get on over here. We're doing burpees. We're running sprints up and down the field. But so I think a lot of people have misinterpreted that to have this broad authority to be able to go onto the 50-yard line and proselytize to the teammate, to the team members after, a game. And then, of course, they see their favorite NFL players usually do it on Sunday. So it's ingrained and baked in our culture. And I understand why young people who look up to these athletes would want to do it. But at the end of the day, the Supreme Court said that he could go on there and pray by himself in and reflect in his own personal way.
Yeah,
privately.
That is what the Supreme Court said. And the way they got there was by ignoring what was actually happening on the field in that case. Right, there are pictures in the record before the Supreme Court of Coach Kennedy, looming over his team who are all down on one knee in a circle while he prays over them. But instead of addressing those facts, the Supreme Court made up their own whitewashed version of what was happening on the field in order to get the result they wanted, which is a shame. All right. So now, before we get into audience questions, if you'd like to learn more about Christian proselytizing in public school sports, FFRF did an extensive report on this topic in 2015 called Pray to Play, where we exposed a widespread, coordinated effort by evangelical Christian organizations to proselytize in public school athletic programs, often violating constitutional protections against government-endorsed religion. So you can check out that report by scanning that QR code on your screen, and there should also be a link in the video description. Okay, with that, I think we should get to some audience questions. So let's see what we've got here. How can a student activist be effective in exercising their right to non-religion without risking their status on a team? Or is this a lose-lose scenario?
You never know. I think it depends on the dynamics of the team and the coach. I experience it still as an adult in the legislature. There are some committee chairs that will open a committee meeting with a long prayer to Jesus. And we look around and everyone is bowing their heads. And, I choose to keep my head up. And I wonder sometimes it's going to affect my ability to get a bill through or to even get a bill heard. And, you just kind of have to stand on your own principle. You can't control what other people do. You can only stand for your values and what you think is right. And if you are retaliated against, thankfully you have organizations like FFRF that can come to your defense. But I would say never compromise your values based off of what could happen.
Well put. Matt, this one is for you. What changes can we as outside adults make that will discourage coaches from preaching to students? Is the only way to truly stop this to wait until a non-religious individual is given the chance to be a coach?
Boy, that's a good one. I think it's difficult because from the outside of the athletic program, it can be hard to even know that stuff is going on. I think, there's always, in the larger, say, professional sports arena, there's, voting with your dollars. And if you see someone who is, say, running their NFL team as though it's a church, well, then maybe don't support that NFL team. But when you get lower, like college and high school, you don't always see that. And as the outside person, you may not necessarily even know that it's going on, know who's doing it, or who to even talk to. I guess I'm going to go big picture, and I'm going to say the best way might just be join an organization like FFRF. Speak to the people in your community. Talk to the leadership on the school board, at the university, and try and be vocal about the fact that this is not right, and it's not okay, and it causes harm to student athletes.
Yeah. It's nice to imagine that the non-Christian student athlete may speak up and change their coach's mind without sacrificing their own position on their team. But that is why FFRF exists, right? If you're a student or a parent and you see this happening, we exist so that we can inform the school district that it's not okay without compromising anyone's playing time, right? We don't sacrifice the anonymity of our complainants in order to get that message to the coaches. All right, I think we have time for one more question here. Do you think these coaches feel empowered to use their stances because there's an assumption that most sports players are religious? And where do you think that assumption comes from?
I think there's some truth to that. Yeah, it seems to be that sports and religion, superstition, and rituals are so ingrained in our culture that many people, especially in states like Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas, would just assume that everyone's a Christian. So who would have a problem with that? And if they don't, if they do have a problem, they're not forced to do it. Like, that's how I hear a lot of people justify these type of examples is, well, if they don't want to participate, no one's forcing them. They can always leave. They don't understand the dynamics of camaraderie and sport and having a teammate who's going to bail on you. Like, come on, like, are you not bought in? You're not one of us. Like, we are a team. Let's all do this together. And so I do think that as a good teammate, it would put you in a tough situation, because as a good teammate, I would sacrifice my personal beliefs for the betterment of the team, if that meant that we're going to have more cohesion and we're going to bond and we're going to have a better chance of winning. You know, that is actually sacrificing oneself for the overall success of the team. And so I do believe that all it would take is maybe a few people saying, hey, we're not very comfortable with this. And then maybe other people would understand. It's amazing how often this never even comes up for someone to consider or to think about, especially for young people and young coaches.
You know, we've brought up superstition and ritual a few times, and I think that the pervasiveness of superstition in sports, you know, look at baseball, very large percentage of baseball players have superstitious rituals that they go through before every game, right? They have to wear this particular pair of socks. They have to have this particular thing in their pocket, their lucky rabbit's foot, whatever it is. And I think that pervasiveness of superstition and religion in sports gives cover to the religiousness coming in, because, well, it's just another part of our religious, it just fits right in with the rest of the superstition that we all follow. And much like, you know, hey, the whole team says this particular thing before every game, and that's our ritual, our superstitious ritual. Much like that, you can say, well, we all pray before every game because that's part of our superstitious ritual. I think that's why we end there, and it just kind of slides right in under this cover of this superstitious, ritualistic type of feel.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I think it's human nature, and the more people educate themselves and they learn and they hear from someone who's non-theistic, I think that will open up their mind a lot. Many people just have never considered it.
Just like you said, Mickey, that you would sacrifice your personal beliefs for the betterment of the team. It should be on the coaches, if they are good coaches, to sacrifice proselytizing for the betterment of their team, right?
That's right. And I will add a caveat to that. That would have been, like, you know, younger in high school and of course in college. But now, as I've become an adult and I've become more grounded in what I believe and the lack thereof, I'm more comfortable in not doing that, going with that. But for young people, they're very susceptible to it. And that's why we see a lot of Christian nationalists who create legislation specifically aimed toward school-age children, because they are so impressionable.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why FFRF exists. So if you think a coach at your public school or university is engaging in religious coercion, we invite you to report a church-state violation on our website at ffrf.org/legal/report. All right, so that wraps up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. Thank you both for being on. A new episode of our broadcast TV show, Free Thought Matters, airs this weekend. FFRF co-presidents Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker will speak with the new executive director of the Texas Freedom Network, Felicia Martin.
Texas continues to be last in the allotment or, price per pupil cost point. And so, yes, religious schools do not have to provide transportation. They can decide who they want to admit. So we hear a lot of language around school choice here, but it really has nothing to do with school choice. It has everything to do with private schools being able to choose who they admit, choose how they support those students, and they're under no obligation or regulations at the state level.
You'll be able to watch that episode on TV stations around the country this weekend and soon on the FFRF YouTube channel.
And don't miss our weekly radio show, Free Thought Radio. You can find Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to check out the latest episode of We Dissent, the only podcast hosted exclusively by women constitutional lawyers discussing state-church separation. Listen and subscribe at We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out online at we-dissent.org.
Finally, if you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you. If not, please join us. See you next time on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.
Freedom!